Yeah, it's up. Okay.
It's up.
All right. So hello and welcome everyone to the first podcast on this channel, I guess. Well, it's rather the second one because we did one in public with Chris in Germany. But I figured out that over the years, during my, let's say, online presence, I met many interesting people in the whole online fitness community and bodyweight training, to be specific. And I decided that each one of those people can bring something to the table, something very interesting, something very unique. And so today, I guess it's my first guest, David. Hi, David. And could you introduce yourself, who you are, what you're doing, and in general, something about you?
Yeah, sure. So, hey guys, what's up? I'm Davide. Or David, depends like how you pronounce it.
First mistake in pronunciation.
Yeah. I'm originally from Italy, but I live in Czech Republic since I've been like bilingual since my whole life. And I feel like I took an interest in bodyweight training when I quit my swimming career. I used to be a competitive swimmer from age like pretty early, the standard competitive age, like 8, I'd say, till I was like 19. Yeah, let's say that I was at a pretty high level. Depends, like, obviously what you define as like being high in performance, but I guess that I'm satisfied with the level that I achieved in swimming. Like my best achievements were being in the junior national team for like 2 years and like taking part in the European Cup in long distance swimming in 2013 in Hungary.
Okay, and when was that? So that was 2013, right?
Yes, I think so. Or 12, I don't remember, to be
12,
honest.
okay. And what was your age back then? Like when you transitioned from swimming to bodyweight training was...
I transitioned into bodyweight training when I was 19. I just started uni,
Okay.
I had my first semester and also my passion for swimming has been going down at that point for a long time. And also like training twice a day before going to uni was pretty harsh, to be honest. So at that point, I just decided that it was time to call it quits. And I just transitioned into bodyweight training. Initially, it was just about not becoming a fat person. And
so it was just like any other activity, right?
Yeah, it was fitness.
It was fitness, okay. But something like was there some specific thing that you found in bodyweight training that was different, that was more exciting than in like traditional conventional gym training?
Yeah, I mean, like already since I were like 15, I guess, I started lifting weights for swimming, and I never took an interest in that, to be honest. I always found it boring in a sense, even though right now I don't mind that much lifting weights. But yeah, and what really was interesting to me about bodyweight training is like the control aspect. Being able to fully control your body, which is something it's very underrated for most people. Like they think that they can do it, but it's a pretty simplistic view, in my opinion. So yeah, definitely
So the body control was the main aspect
of it, but also like I don't want to sound like I have no ego. Like obviously there's also the flexing component of it, of like being able to do something that it's in the general population's eye something extraordinary, right?
Like that's the main reason that brought me into calisthenics. So there's nothing to there's nothing to be ashamed of. Obviously, everyone, I think, transitioning from, for example, from gym to bodyweight training will find out that people in general, because they don't see much of this type of skills. Like before that, they were only associated with gymnastics and with like some competitive sports. Now it's getting more popular in conventional gyms, conventional training of people. So I guess it's very interesting because actually you transitioned from swimming to bodyweight training, right? But now you're a gymnast. So
Yeah, I guess
like,
I guess I can say I'm a gymnast. Like those etiquettes are obviously like limiting in a sense, or like they're not always like what defines you. I guess like
okay, yes,
I mean, you can call yourself whatever, you know.
it's only a name, it's only a label, but
Yeah, exactly.
based on like certain, you know, categories or thing, there are differences in your training than in conventional bodyweight
Yes.
fitness. The fact that you do have a coach, the fact that you do train on the rings specifically, and you like you work on certain routines, I think is classifying you as a gymnast. So my question to you is, when did you transition from strictly like calisthenics, we can call it, to gymnastics, to rings training, ring specific training?
I specifically remember more the skills that I was able to do at that point more than the really like training age.
Okay.
I'm not too sure about the dates, but like I think it was around 2.5 years in, you know. And at that point, I was able to straddle planche pretty consistently. I had a shaky straddle planche on rings, and I was close to full planche on the ground, or like on P-bars, parallettes, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, and the rest was pretty consistent. Front lever was down, obviously back lever, human flag, muscle ups, everything was like pretty much submaximal at that point. So I'd say 2.5 years in, I transitioned into gymnastics, and it also hugely depends on like my private life in a sense. Like
Okay.
obviously, you know, like moving to Sydney, which allowed me to have
Yes, so the facilities, the like
yes,
you had actual ability to train properly, and not only at the park or so that's, I guess, my next question is, do you think that gymnastics, the level of specificity and the requirements of sports of gymnastics, even when we talk only about rings training, do you think that having a facility like we mentioned and a coach is something necessary, something to think of like during your first years of gymnastics, something that you have to do even if you start as an adult, or you can get pretty good results, pretty decent level just by training by yourselves in the park on the rings that basically hang from the tree?
definitely the latter. We were having a discussion yesterday about the relationship between like hard work and smart work. And
Yes.
I really firmly believe that like in the first stages of any skill development, you simply have to work hard. They're obviously relearning some patterns. It's a horrible process to go through, but still, there is an epidemic of people that are simply not working hard enough, in my opinion. In the beginning, you just have to destroy yourself with training, in a sense. And yes, so and that for that reason, you don't need the optimal context. You know, you don't need to have a coach. You don't need to have the perfect facility and everything. But and also it depends on your view of where you want to take it. You know, like if you're satisfied with having a straddle planche on the ground with a front lever and everything, I think like you can pretty much achieve it by yourself if you're pretty smart about it. If you want to move on to more advanced stuff, in a sense, you definitely need to improve your conditions, and that's exactly the point where smart work comes into play. You know,
That's when it's
having
gonna
some
just complement. That's the another necessary factor being smart about your training, but the hard work, actually the effort, is your base, something that you cannot skip. That's what you
Yeah,
want to say.
yeah, definitely. Even from a training philosophy standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
you have to learn how to sacrifice yourself initially. You just have to work hard. I know this sounds like a motivational post, but it's simply the truth, you know,
Yes,
like
it sounds cliche, but the fact that you have the competitive background, right? Maybe there is a correlation between this fact, and that you could actually work really hard, effort-wise,
yes.
from the very beginning. And we had that conversation before that even though my background is also, you can call it competitive when it comes to tennis.
Hmm.
So I've been playing tennis since I've been a kid, and I actually also did compete in some tournaments, but I never transitioned this, I guess, passion or something when it comes to the effort, because I had passion to bodyweight training. I had immense passion, but this killing yourself in the gym, something that maybe it may lead to overtraining in the long run, of course, and it's something that people with competitive background transitioning to gym or calisthenics may struggle with. But that's something I did not experience, and that was weird for you, right?
Yes.
All right, so we talked about the transition from calisthenics to gymnastics, and now, so what is, because what is your age right now? You just finished college, right?
Yes. Yeah. I finished college 10 days ago at this point. Oh, no, I guess two weeks ago at this point. And I started working a typical 9 to 5 corporate job. And I'm 24, by the way.
And you're 24, and you still have very ambitious goals when it comes to gymnastics, right? When it comes to strength elements, at least.
Again, obviously depends on what you define
it's
as
all it's
ambition.
all relative, of course. It's all
Yes.
relative, but I would like to just because rings, I think I have a feeling that rings are the apparatus that because it's mainly strength related, you can actually progress through the years, like till being at your like older years even. So there are, I think, even Olympic gymnasts that are over 40 and they
Yes.
still compete,
Jordan
right?
Yovchev competed at 41, I think, in his last Olympics, and he was a ring specialist.
Yes, exactly. So that's something that you actually can continue, that you're able to, if you're gonna have a smart approach
Hmm.
and a coach, someone that is gonna give you advice, give you right training program, and if you're gonna keep on, I think you can just maintain your maintain making progress through the years. And so when it comes to the gymnastics, one last thing I would like to ask you is, what are the main differences, or like right now looking from this perspective of a gymnast, what would you say are the biggest like things bodyweight athletes could learn from gymnasts who train on rings, something that lacks in bodyweight fitness, something that lacks in this community, that is pretty similar to what you do, but still it's not the same level?
I'd say it's definitely the phase of preparation and actually making sure that you're ready to enjoy a skill. In the
Okay.
sense that obviously it becomes much more relevant on rings. Think about any kind of pressing from in shoulder extension. Imagine Azarian cross, imagine Nakayama cross, or even multis pretty much. Uh, all these skills require a tremendous amount, obviously, of strength. I think that is pretty self-explanatory, but also an incredible amount of tendon preparation. And I'm not saying it's the number one factor when learning a planche, but from looking at people that do body weight, that is definitely the something, in my opinion, in legs. Their bodies are simply not strong, structurally strong enough in that moment to endure that training load. You know what I mean? And it's always about this understanding that training has to be a pyramid. At the base the base has to be incredibly broad for the top to be really high.
Yes, and I think that people in the calisthenics community do have a problem with defining what base actually is.
Exactly. Yes.
If you look at very old street workout footage, you can tell that for them the base was simply push-ups, pull-ups done with high reps. Then if you look at it's transitioned more into weighted calisthenics, then it's going to be, of course, more towards building strength, more towards lower reps, but it's still going to be about pull-ups and dips, for example, right? And it's your base. But I think that building a foundation for a skill, especially if we talk about such an immense, such a hard skill like the ones you mentioned, you listed, there has to be something different. It's no longer about only safety, only progress. It's just such a demanding skill, both physically, mentally, that you just have to be prepared. And it's not like you can just try and do it, right? The whole training process is got to be very progressively built towards achieving this goal at a time frame of sometimes even couple of years. For some skills, I'm pretty sure that you have to work 5+ years even to achieve, from the very baseline level to achieve Maltese cross. I can only imagine that if I can do how many years it took for me to get straddle planche. I can only imagine what it takes to get to the point of being able to do Maltese.
Yeah, and that is something I see. Even I see falling myself in this trap constantly, and I would use the gymnastics code of points as an example. So what I see very often in body weight, calisthenics, however you want to call it, is that people think that, okay, I achieved this level of a skill, let's say, for example, a front lever, okay? And just because I achieved this front lever, I achieved it, I have let's say 5 seconds of it, so I kind of mastered it in a sense. I can immediately go on and work on Victorian on bars, the P-bar.
Okay. Yes,
that is ridiculous to think. It's and I made this mistake quite a lot too. For example, if we take into account gymnastics, I thought that when I achieved my first cross pull, going from support into cross, holding cross, pulling back out, which is a C value, I thought, okay, I'm gonna achieve a D value in, I don't know, whatever, couple of months,
Yeah.
But the more I go on, the more I understand that if I want to achieve, right now, I want to achieve an E value, I know that I have to have nearly all the D values to be able to achieve an E value, because it's always about this pyramid, the more you go on, the more you go higher in the pyramid, still you have to have that base, and it's not anymore push-ups and everything. That base or what it's gonna build, that E value, it's gonna be D values. Imagine pinata cross, cross pull planche, Maltese on rings, stuff like this.
So you talk a lot about those values, the letters in the gymnastics table. Would you say that this whole table, the way it's created, it's very accurate and it's a good thing to? No.
No, sorry for stopping you, but that was just like, no,
Yeah,
it's not completely accurate in any way.
okay.
Just to give you, but there is a percentage that it's pretty much perfectly spot on in the valuing, you know. But there are some skills that are ridiculously overpowered, or some that are really underpowered
Underpowered.
or undervalued, really. Imagine, like, I remember that in the last code of points, inverted cross was a D, which in my opinion it's a fair value for an inverted cross, and it was downgraded to C. And, like,
Okay. So it's still being updated, right?
no, yeah, it's constantly
It's
updated, but
constantly changing.
unfortunately, it's not always updated in the right way. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like inverted cross is definitely not a C value from any perspective. Like it's hard to learn the technique of it. It's pretty hard strength wise. That is not a C. That is a full on D value. You know. Oh, and for example, imagine this: you have in the D values you have multi-zone rings, but another D value is multi-press to planche, which is
Okay,
so
yes.
much harder. Like
Yes.
that is obviously an E value, you know, but you kind of get used to it, you know, when you learn what
Okay.
is actually like right on the scale and what it's like undervalued, overvalued, you know.
But I guess there is like another component that comes into play when it comes to discussing the difficulty, the relative difficulty of skills, and that's for everyone. It's gonna be a bit different, right? And I guess it's a good time to very fluently go to to another part of this podcast, because what I really want to discuss with you today is the front lever and the skill of the front lever, or basically horizontal pulling in gymnastics and in calisthenics. So as you know, and if you're watching this video, uh, you probably came from my Instagram, or you're following me there as well, because the channel is pretty small and most of my people here came from Instagram. You know that on my Instagram stories lately I've been tagging David a lot, and anytime I tag him, I'm doing something related to the front lever, which is my goal right now. And the thing with my front lever is it's disproportionately weak in comparison to all things I'm doing. And it's not only about in comparison to my handstand push-ups or things that are not that much like related to the skill. I'm talking about weighted pull-ups. I'm talking about strictly pulling uh, strength elements. When it comes to the horizontal pulling, it seems to be my biggest weakness. And so my first question to you would be, like, by analyzing my training and giving me advice over this last months, let's say, do you see certain pattern or certain reason for why my horizontal pulling, despite the work I put in, it is still relatively so weak?
Yeah, I definitely see a pattern going on in bodyweight training, and that is simply that imagine when you're a newbie, you start, the king of all exercises is pull-ups, vertical pulling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're extremely used to just doing pull-ups, you know, to moving in that vertical pattern, you know. And for that reason, you can see a lot of people that, in my opinion, are good but not exceptional, having really good numbers at one-arm pull-ups. You know, um, I I don't have any names right now.
Okay.
I'm not honestly that invested, you know, in bodyweight training anymore. So I don't know, like, who to specifically use as an example. But still, I mean, oh yeah, Daniel Vadnel, you know, from
Daniel
Fitness
Vedno, of
News.
course, yes.
We were talking about it yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
that back in the day he used to have 5 one-arm pull-ups, which, in my opinion, considering his body weight, it's an
It's
absolutely
insane.
amazing achievement, you know. And I remember that already at that point I pretty much had the same front lever as him, you know, which is insane. And I had zero, very much zero one-arm pull-ups at that
And
point.
at the same time, like, our one arm chin up or one arm pull up, let's call it,
Mm-hmm.
was I think also very similar.
Yeah.
At least like and weighted pull-ups. Like what is your max weighted pull-up and with the body weight if you remember correctly, or at least in some like.
Yeah, I was in Paris at this point on my Erasmus,
Mhm.
and I think I pulled underhand in a chin up like 60 kilos, and I was at
Right.
79. I'm not too sure.
Okay, so at the very similar body weight, because I think I was 78, 79 of as well. I pulled 50. I think my max is 51, but I had definitely the strength to do 50, 53.5.
Okay.
Let's say, overhand grip pull up. So the difference is not as huge, and at the same time, I barely hold advanced tuck front lever, and you're doing full front lever pulls with 5 kilos ankle weights. What is going on here? Like, is that
Um,
does it mean like there is no carryover from vertical pulling to the horizontal, or is that maybe the way you're doing those pull-ups may be different? Back in the day, I got advice from Little Beastem that I was doing my pull-ups with too close grip, and I was using too much like of my only arms, basically what he described there. And I changed my grip. They were still there. They were a bit weaker, but
mhm.
I think they're coming up. And actually, while the front lever is still maybe not stagnating but going very slow, the pull-ups, the wider grip pull-ups, were in theory I engage a bit more like back and this open body cue. It's still going much faster. So what is the thing? What is your like think? What do you think about it?
I don't even think it's that correlated to pull-ups or doing pull-ups in a right or wrong way. It's simply about doing front lever in a wrong way or not understanding at all what is going on with your body, you know? Uh, that is an interesting correlation actually that just came to my mind. And it's not those people that are good at pull-ups that are good at front levers, are people that are good at deadlifts that are really good at front lever. And
Okay.
we already talked one time that
Yes, that
when done correctly, front lever feels a lot like a hinge, like a
hinge.
hinging movement.
The front lever pull is gonna feel like a
Exactly. Yeah.
hinge.
And as I told you a couple of months ago, and I feel like that made a huge shift in the approach that you have about your front lever. It's
Hmm.
simply not understanding the proper cues of a front lever, which should be, and this is going to be a big moment for everyone, should not care about what's happening with your scapulas. It is obviously important, but you just get too stuck in your own mind thinking about that, and
Scapula
it's
retraction.
exactly this whole discussion and debate that shouldn't be your goal to think about that. Your goal should be to think about some cues that ensure to make your body open.
Hmm.
In our case, I like the two ones that I use most with people is to have an open posture, like really
Okay.
nice open chest, you know, and
Open chest is the one that really like spoke to me.
Mhm. And pushing your hips real nice and tall, you know,
Hmm.
not letting them sink in, which leads to how important it is to use basically, obviously, your lats as a base from where you develop the strength aspect of the skill, and your lower back and your glutes as a
Hmm.
sort of way to sustain your whole body in air.
Yes, that's the something that I want to get to in a couple of minutes. But first, like coming back with this whole retraction and scapulas discussion. So because it's not necessarily uh, it's not false statement that you need retraction in front lever. It's just that it's for a newbie, especially if you're gonna
Yeah.
explain him that you have to just simply pull your scapulas back. he's not going to be focusing on the right thing. And even if you take someone like me, who has some experience in bodyweight training and had a pretty strong scapular retraction from all the pull-ups, from all the other things, from simply doing retraction depression exercise before, like even that was not enough to understand the proper body cue in the front lever, which kind of like moves us to another point, which is something you mentioned already, the glutes, the abs. When people talk about core during front lever, I think that it's heavily misunderstood what actually, for example, what you actually mean by talking about core. So core is not something that only, it's not only your abs that will hold your legs in that parallel position, but it's about the whole body tension, right? Could you describe like how do you understand the core? Because you stress out the importance of it pretty often. When we speak, it's something that you emphasize a lot. And I think if you don't understand correctly what you mean, there might be some misunderstanding.
Yeah, sure. For me, like the problem, especially with front lever, I feel like this is a big problem, you know, is that you tell people that core becomes important in front lever. Okay, cool. What they understand is that the rectus abdomini becomes important, and I really mean it. I feel like I activate my rectus abdomini maybe at 6%, you know, of what is actually capable of contracting. It's so not relevant in a front lever. What is really important there, I think we should shift from using the word core, you know, which
yes, definitely
sort of
core is not.
like
I
buzzword
hate this term, honestly. I hate this term because it tells you nothing. It's what like is there some are there some like specific muscles that are classified as a core muscle, or so let's not use this term maybe. So let's just move to what muscles. Yes, midsection is a good one because it actually represents what is happening in this hips area. So when it comes to midsection, so just continue what you've been.
Yeah, so let's think specifically, because we're talking pretty much about two skills at this point. We're talking about front lever and we're talking about planche. Everybody wants these two. These two are typical levers, right? Mm-hmm. So we can divide these skills in, at least in my opinion, mainly into two aspects of development or like skill acquisition. The first one is the brute strength aspect of it, right? Which is in the planche, it's typically ensured through the front delt.
Front delt.
Yeah. In the front lever, it's ensured by the latissimus dorsi.
By lats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great. I think everyone understands this. What is missing is it's obviously the aspect of literally holding your body together, you know. In gymnastics, I love this expression. You know, we talk a lot. When I was in Sydney, we talked a lot about body tension and ensuring that the body is behaving as a single lever. You know, let's call them from the scaps down, everything is a single unit. You cannot think about like your abs are gonna have this role, your glutes are gonna have this role, and that points to one thing, that the ensuring that the body is one single lever has to be somewhere close to the scap, you know, or close to the back, you know. In a front lever, you hold your body as a single unit through squeezing your lower back up, you know, and pushing your glutes up. In a planche, on the other hand, what happens is that we're going to use muscles that are in the proximity on the other side of the body, in the front, you know. And you already know this, like for me, the most underrated muscle in planche is the serratus anterior. And through those muscles, obviously, we're gonna think about some other cues if we lack them. Like, for example, I'm gonna point my toes to feel more my legs contracting. So yeah, these can be useful, but like the main one should be that we develop strength through those areas that we already mentioned. And the second one is that we're gonna ensure that the body acts as a single unit, one lever, as one single lever. And that in front lever specifically is achieved, as I mentioned a couple of times, through pushing your glutes up, having an open posture, all this stuff.
All right. So as we know, like in theory, what creates a good front lever and what maybe are some barriers that come if you have strong pull-ups, and why, despite having strong pull-ups, strong other things, other pulling movements, you might struggle with front lever. Now, as we know that, what can we do about it? And what would you say is that, because I pretty much know your answer, but and probably people who like follow me, they know as well through just watching my stories. But what would you say is the exercise that is going to specifically address those points that you just mentioned, and is going to just address the whole front lever as a one and teach us proper mechanics and let us progress further?
So there is one exercise which, in my opinion, it's maybe even superior to the hold itself. Obviously the hold, like the first answer, it's obviously the hold, and that is pretty much self-explanatory. But connected to that, we have a lot of variations which are famous in the bodyweight community, like ice cream makers, front lever raises, like from hang, we're going to go into a front lever. Complete raises or full ROM raises, however you want to call them.
Pulls
all these can be beneficial, in my opinion, in the beginner phase, like to introduce just the pulling through straight elbows, which is a very particular feeling initially, even in planche, like staying on straight elbows initially, like it's
something not necessarily natural.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely don't think our body was designed, to pull through
because
straight elbow.
It's actually pulling with mechanical disadvantage. So
exactly, and
something that we would never ever do. Yes. But we can adapt. So it's not to say that it's wrong or anything, but it's something that you have to just introduce from the beginning. All right, so we have that.
I was saying. We have some exercises which, in my opinion, can be good to make our body understand how actually you pull into a front, or like how you use a straight elbow in a pulling movement. Sure. But those exercises are going to ingrain horrible patterns of front lever mechanics. They don't develop any of those things we talked about, like open posture, pushing your hips up, simply because if you notice, what is wrong about these movements is that the hips never reach the center of gravity. In other words, simply your hips are not under your hands, and that is a bad front lever if you think about it.
Yes, so if you watch my video, it's my first video on this channel, basically talks about, I'm talking about what creates those skills like planche and front lever. It's basically having the center of gravity at the level of your hands. If you think about it, that's when it's gonna just balance out. And what you say is during those variations you mentioned, so ice cream makers, full pulls, even half pulls, the ones that I was doing a lot, by using momentum, we can get to the front lever position for half a second, but it's never real front lever position because we only got there by momentum, and the lean, sort of like in the planche we have lean, in front lever there is also lean component. So we either going to compensate by breaking in hips and making our body shorter, or other compensation mechanisms, or just not be able just progress with the pull, but never able to hold this position for even like half a second, to be static in this position, because there's no like requirements met regards the center of gravity being under hands. And so what would you do instead if those exercises don't help in the long run?
And that exactly brings us to the king of front lever exercises, in my opinion, which is basically what I call a front lever pull is being an inverted hang, lowering down to front lever, pulling up. That to me is a front lever pull. Why? Because it's physically impossible not to reach the center of gravity.
You're gonna just fall if yes. And what's also a nice thing to add to this exercise is probably some kind of dead stop or rather the pause at the front lever phase. So you lower down to the front lever and then you hold for even 1 second just to make sure you're not using stretch reflex, right?
Exactly. And also, like, coming back to why those exercises are not ideal, in my opinion, is that an argument that I hear quite a lot is that, yeah, but you're doing front lever, not at my point, but still, you're doing front lever pulls with assistance. Why would you prefer something that has like lighter intensity in a sense, you know, that, for example,
the load, yes.
Let's say I weigh 85 kilos, I'm doing with whatever it is, 20 kilos assistance. Why would you do it with 20 kilos assisted instead of doing an exercise that allows you to use your whole body weight? You're not raising your whole body weight in that movement. That is momentum all over the place. If you think that is not how physics works, pretty much. You cannot think that you're raising your full body weight while using momentum. Momentum is going to subtract some of that weight. And that is the harsh truth about it, you know.
Yes, and that's why I don't understand when people say, sorry that I stopped you, but it's something that came to my mind. Very often I hear like people say that, oh, I'm at the phase with my front lever that I'm able to do lift to the front lever, I'm able to do a full front lever lift, but I'm still not able to hold it. And if you think about it, if like the raising from the front lever is actually requires more strength. The concentric is going to require more strength than isometric, and eccentric is going to require less strength than isometric. Isometric is going to be in the middle. So if you don't have strength to pull up, you're going to be able to hold. If you're not going to be able to hold that, you're going to drop down slowly, and that's the eccentric contraction, something that I was talking about in the Calisthenics Programming 3, episode 3. So what causes the front lever pull to be easier than holding the front lever, even though it's just biomechanically impossible? It's the fact that we use momentum, most likely. If you like would do a slow front lever pull from the dead stop, a slow front lever pull through the front lever position and then pull up, it would be much harder than just holding front lever. If you have strength for that, you're going to be able to hold front lever for sure. Just a thought, because I never addressed that, but it's another like in bodyweight fitness community, it's another like misunderstanding. And no one talks about it like in full planche press. Everyone knows that full planche press is harder, but somehow front lever raise is easier than full front lever.
No, and also adding to your point, I can give you a specific example of how actually hard it is to pull from hang into a front lever. I used to have a more than 20-second long front lever, full front lever, and one day, just for fun, I did like from hang 8-second long raises into front lever and then holding it like 4 seconds, and it was, I'm not saying it was a max out or anything, but it was hard. You know, it wasn't easy at all.
And you talk as a guy who can do pulls with 5 kilos ankle weights, right? So it gotta be very hard if you think about it. And so, like, coming back to this variation, because something people can, I think, associate with, maybe they're on my level or a bit lower or a bit above my level. Something that is worth mentioning is you specifically, you like introducing the open hip variation from the very beginning. So if you do the half pull, you do the invert to front lever pull, considering that someone has, for example, only advanced tuck or only tuck front lever ability, is doing this exercise in the tuck or in advanced tuck is something worth addressing, or should we actually go and do the open hip variation with the help of bands or pulley system?
Depends. As usual, it depends. As I was saying in the beginning, I would put tuck front lever, advanced tuck front lever, and all things related to them, like the pulls for like inverted to hold to pull, all things related to these two positions in the beginning category, because like it doesn't feel like, even when I do like tuck planches, for example, you know, it never feels as a straddle planche or a full planche. It just feels different, and that's exactly where you're never gonna feel how actually it is to hold your body in the air, you know, in a tuck front lever, because you're so close. Like you're not even like leaning into it pretty much.
Yes, yes, yes.
And for that reason, I think like having an open posture, it's relevant in planche, but in front lever, it's absolutely crucial. Like you're not gonna get good if you're
Yes,
not.
I'm pretty sure that you can hold 5 sets of 60 seconds tuck front lever and still not be able to even do like open hip straddle variation.
Yeah.
Because that's essentially what was my problem. I was doing very like lots of advanced tuck work with ankle weights, pulls, pull to the position, but still, because the body cue, the actual technique, the internal cue was so different than what it actually is in all the open hip variations. It didn't transfer. I can say it didn't transfer at all, because I'm now working with two bands attached to myself, and I'm working on those half pulls with in the halfway straddle, right? So now, as we have that, I would like
And
to ask you.
just to conclude, like again, if you're a beginner, you can use talk, advanced talk. Like they're good. I'm not saying like don't even do them or don't even try them ever. But if you're serious about this and you have some training, like some training age under your belt, definitely go for anything, for the least hard variation that you can find, in a sense, with open hips, which obviously it's always gonna be the halfway
Straddle
strap.
halfway.
Yeah.
Okay, but I didn't want to like finish just yet. I wanted to ask you one more thing. What are your thoughts on isometrics in front lever? Is that something you would include, for example, to someone's program, or it depends, as I predict?
Yeah, it depends as always. Unfortunately,
Okay, so
there's no yes or
maybe
no answer.
it was maybe not the best
But
question. Maybe what would be
no,
the
that,
benefit that they?
no. I just want to add to this point that I feel that there is a terrible misunderstanding of the statement, which is scientifically accurate, that maximal holds can burn your CNS out. That is factually true. It's supported by science. You cannot argue against that. Okay, that is cool. But I think that people got too stuck on the fact that holds can burn your CNS. What it says is that maximal holds can burn your CNS. If I'm able, for example, let's take me as an example. I have a 30-second plus full front lever, and literally in my warm up, I do 2 8-second holds, you know, of full front lever, just because it's so submaximal to me. that 8 second it's going to be nothing. Like you cannot think that it's going to burn, like my warm up is going to burn my CNS out. There is no way, and it does not, otherwise I would feel it. And again, if the hold is submaximal, use it. Like in my opinion, there is nothing more specific than the hold itself, but again, it has to be submaximal. In my opinion, the king of any kind of method for specifically bodyweight training and rings training is concentric movement united with the hold itself. So do as exactly we would use in a front lever pull. We would do inverted hang, go into front lever, stop 2 seconds, two or 3 seconds basically, and pull back up. Obviously, it's a very, very hard method. Initially, you're just not used to it. You're used to using the stretch reflex, everything. If you get used to it, I'm pretty sure you're going to have good results.
Yes, I can confirm that it's very hard. The effort that you have to put in to actually like complete all the reps in your set, if everything is like measured correctly, it's a very hard exercise. Like because you have all those components. You lower down, you hold the position, the proper position that because you are able to hold it and bands are attached properly, you actually meet the requirements when it comes to the center of gravity and hands level. Then you have to hold this position for 1 second and 2 seconds just to assure that you're not using stretch reflex, and then pull back up with this hinge motion. It's a very complex exercise if you think about it. There are many components that you have to think about during this exercise, but that's maybe why it's so effective also. You get all the points, all the required cues, points, and you're just what's probably important during that, like we have the exercise, but now as we have the, let's say, perfect exercise, we have a good solid foundation of building a program. But what would be your approach in building an actual routine of that? Would you go more like higher reps, closer to using your whole body weight with easier variation but with less assistance, or the other way, so using the full front lever, something the most specific you can, but with more assistance provided by pulley or bands?
Guess what the answer is going to be on this?
It depends.
Yeah, I mean, like if you just started working, like
this whole discussion could
training principles. Yeah.
We could just I could ask you questions and you could just answer it depends. And we would be over in 10 minutes.
Yeah. No, I mean it always I don't know why
it's true.
People don't stick to strength training principles, like it's just training literature. It's 100 of years of science that supports this, so why don't use it? Simply, if you're in a beginning stage of developing that skill, and like it's not related to the overall training age. I'm saying, for example, someone who is starting to take seriously front lever, he says, okay, this is going to be my main training goal right now. I want to achieve this fast. Obviously, you start from again, it's the pyramid, like you build a huge base of workload. How you do that? You do it through volume. Volume, obviously, it's going to require you to use an easier variation, higher reps, more assistance, everything. And as you progress closer to the acquisition of the skill, you're obviously gonna lessen the assistance, or like I would say that like you're gonna lessen the assistance progressively, but also you want to move closer to the final shape, so I would say that in the last month leading up to the skill acquisition, you shouldn't train any straddle, any halfway straddle, simply just like full front lever pulls.
Well, that's interesting, but that's being very specific. But I can sense like why it might be very effective. You get the actual skill practice, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you think about, like, again, going back to strength training literature, like the last phase in any block periodization is actually called skill acquisition, you know.
Yes,
So why
because
would you
yes.
work on a straddle if your goal is a full front lever, you know?
Mhm.
So you're simply going to work on that shape, extremely low reps, and it's going to be specific, very, very specific.
Is powerlifting and strength training principles something that you rigorously apply to your training? Like at the normally, do you use certain things that are more because in gymnastics we had conversation quite like some time ago, um, where you told me that gymnastics programming in general is not at that high level, that the knowledge is not as like wide on the whole topic, and people actually like coaches don't apply every principle
Yes.
to the gymnastics for different reasons. Maybe there are some like things that from the experience of these coaches they work and they will always have to work, or maybe is that just because it's hard to measure certain things, is obviously going to be different than in weight training. What is your approach? Like mm, do you try, do you attempt like do you have attempts of applying as much of actual pure knowledge to your training, or is that more like loose approach?
Okay, so this is going to be a really long answer. I'm going to start really from the structure of the sport of gymnastics. So,
Okay.
gymnastics, it's a very old-fashioned sport. We all know that. I think maybe you don't know it, but you can sense it even from outside. You know, like some training methods are even famous, like online in the way they're like just barbarians. You know, like for example, like pushing kids into splits and crap like
Yes, yes,
this, you
yes.
know, which is obviously horrible and it's not supported by science. But you have to think more about, okay, let's take gymnastics. You as a gymnastics coach, you get fed a lot of kids, you know. Out of those kids, the main goal is to develop great gymnasts. What does it mean to be a great gymnast? It doesn't mean to be a strong guy. That is, in my opinion, the most misunderstood aspect from the outside. Like, I'm not the ideal gymnast. I'm a ringsman. Specialists are not that supported, to be honest, in the gymnastics
Oh,
community. You know,
okay, okay.
you, your main goal should, as a coach, should be to develop all arounders. If you
Because they
don't,
get as many points, right? As
yeah,
because from looking from the like competition perspective, being able like how does it look like if you're able to compete on a very high level at certain apparatus, but you're shit in others. Uh, that's gonna probably work on the highest level, right? But before that, you have to compete in all of those categories, right? Or how does it look like?
no, it's more about the fact that people don't know this, but actually, gymnastics, it's actually a team sport. You know, like you get the individual
Okay,
competition, you get all around, and then you get the six specialty for men's and the four specialties for
for women.
women. But also you have a team, right? And in this team, you get selected on how many apparati you can actually do properly, you know. So
Okay,
if you're a
so
ringsman, you're
that's
never going to be selected. That this is what is happening, for example, with Team England, you know, in gymnastics and Courtney
mhm.
Tulloch. Courtney Tulloch, I'm not obviously I love Courtney Tulloch. He's an amazing gymnast, but he's probably not going to be selected because Team England has amazing all-arounders. Why would you take someone who's going to give you at best one medal on rings, you know, when you can have someone who's going to deliver in all-around, he's going to deliver in team event, who's going to deliver in possibly like three or four like apparati specific finals, you know. So
I get it.
there is
So
no incentive
specialist.
to there is no incentive to specialize someone in gymnastics.
Mhm.
So also consider how hard it is as a sport to develop a kid in six different abilities. You know, that's why gymnastics is so time consuming. You know, you get when a kid is 15, he basically has to leave school, you know, to train. High level all arounders train around 30 plus hours a week, which for any other sport is ridiculous. I come from a sport background in which volume plays a huge role. I was a long distance swimmer, you know. I used to swim 4 hours a day, or like I had morning trainings 3 times a week, and six times a week I had the afternoon, or like at the best, at like the hardest moment I had 4 trainings in the morning. So that would be 24 hours a week. Still, like the volume that is achieved in gymnastics, since also you have to take into account how the training is structured, in the sense that you need to focus extremely hard, so the rest is going to be really high. So you're going to be in the gymnastics hall, for example, for 6 hours during one training, and that is normal. That is nothing weird about it.
So it's basically becoming your full-time job at this point, like your full-time gig. You have to just sacrifice yourself completely to even be able to attempt to go like on a level as a all-rounder, like you said.
Yeah, the difference is exactly in specialists. For how do you say, for not super compensation. Oh my god, I was in the word right now. For resting requisites, you cannot train as a ringsman like 30 hours a week. That would literally break your tendons in 2 weeks. So from what I know of, most ringsmen train around 60. Like if they're true ringsmen and they train only that, they train around 20 hours at best a week.
Okay.
So yeah,
and that's it's worth mentioning that on the rings, actually there are also some dynamic elements, dismounts, right? So you have to take into account that it's not only strength training, but it's definitely the main part of it.
Yeah, I can tell you.
All right, so I get it.
Coming really to the answer, imagine in all this context where you're not incentivized to have good specialists on rings, where you have to train a kid like 40 hours a week. You get like, if you like, let's say 36, so it's easy for us to count. You have 36 hours a week of training, and you have 6 different apparati to prepare.
Apparatus, yeah.
For rings, you have 6 hours a week. The problem is that those 6 hours a week are used horribly, in my opinion. Like, the problem is that by the influence of other apparati, like can be, for example, high bar or floor, the skill, like, I feel like the whole gymnastic community thinks that rings are simply about acquiring a certain skill, which is true to a certain point, but also you have to have a brutal strength, So that's why you see in gymnastics that you have guys that are incredibly good at rings, and like the whole rest, like usually all-arounders are really bad at rings, because those other events are somehow related.
Yes, that's what I wanted to say, that they are somehow, I think I see the bigger like similarity in all the other apparati than in rings. Rings are kind of like different.
Yeah.
So it makes sense, like, but are there like specialists in other apparatus as well, or is that specifically for rings?
No, there definitely are specialists on other events. Like, I'd say pommel horse, it's a typical specialist thing. You have to be really good at it, and it takes a certain perfect body to be good at pommel. But yeah, rings are the most frequent specialists, because those are simply the guys that are honestly really bad at like being mobile, and not even mobile, but not mobile in the sense of like flexibility.
Flexibility, yes.
Being good
at
body
awareness or like moving. Yeah, I get that, because honestly, I would call myself a person like that. I don't have like a perfect body. If my mobility and strength, for example, I can do handstand, I can do straddle press. I control my body pretty well, but in a sense of actual like moving, it's pretty bad in comparison to pure ability, pure flexibility ability, strength ability. So I would not be a good pommel horse specialist. I'm pretty sure about it.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, coming from the influence of those other apparati, which are trained all in the same way, trial and error, that is gymnastics bread and butter. You have preparation, let's call it like conditioning, even though, again, that's another buzz term that I found pretty dumb. You have conditioning or preparation, for certain skill, but like the actual skill acquisition comes just down to trial and error. You have to try it over and over until you get those like mental cues, all of a sudden you understand the skill and you do it. And I don't know why, but people tend to think that rings in gymnastics, people tend to think that the rings work in the same way. They don't, obviously. Rings are rings are divided into 4 types of skills. You have dismounts, you have swings, you have strength to swing, and strength holds and
Okay.
obviously the last 2 are what is most relevant on rings, and those 2 cannot be trained just through trial and error. Like you cannot try to do an Azerian multis. That is crazy. If you're not ready, your body is gonna destroy itself by doing it, or simply your progress is gonna stagnate like crazy, which is what happens to most people. So why there are even like ring specialists? The answer to the question, it's easier than what it seems, in my opinion. It's simply because they're genetic beasts, and with genetic beasts, with the proper supplementation, you're gonna achieve that result, whatever the training it is. Like, let's see it even in the bodyweight community. Like, there are some guys that obviously don't understand anything about like proper strength training principles and are incredibly good. And I'm talking like Zanetti multis and crazy stuff like that. Without any kind of proper training. So, like, you cannot apply a method that is going to work on a genetic freak on everyone. And that is the problem of gymnastics. And completely finishing this answer, that's why if you're a normal person, don't think of me as a genetic freak. I'm definitely not perfect for gymnastics. I'm 6
And
feet
you're
tall,
not using
100.
creatine.
I'm actually using creatine, but like not creatine. Yeah. I'm definitely not the perfect body for gymnastics. I'm 6 feet tall. I'm, for Europeans, 183 centimeters, per 85 kilos.
That's pretty tall for a gymnast.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Like in the pics that I have from my gymnastics hall, with my friends, I look like a strong man.
Like an older brother.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I can imagine, because I think that do you have some information what is the average height of a gymnast?
I have no
Rings
idea, but
gymnast.
like,
But looking
rings?
at them on the rings, are there like 1 meter and
65.
65, right?
Yeah, I'd say. So yeah, if you're not a genetic freak as us, what you should do is simply be smart about your training. Like, first thing, we said it completely in the beginning of the podcast. You have to train hard. Without training hard, like, don't even think
That's
about
your
making it.
foundation.
Yeah, exactly.
That's your mental and physical
first.
foundation.
Yeah. If you're not gonna work hard, as cliche as it sounds, you're not gonna achieve anything. Especially in this like in body, like in gym. If you just train like smart, I think you can achieve a really good body, to be honest. But like body weight, calisthenics, gymnastics, you have to work horrendously hard in the beginning, because again, we're coming back to the fact that these movements are something that it's not meant to be done by the body. That also reflects, in my opinion, a misunderstanding of what we actually are going for in the gym in general. Like, people think that we go to the gym and we do calisthenics and we're going to become more healthy because of it. That is dumb. To be honest, that is ridiculously dumb.
I actually got this comment like a couple of days ago. I was at the gym and I was doing your front lever drill, and a guy came to me and asked, what would you suggest to, like, what would be something that you would get me on to start this whole calisthenics? My first question was like, what is your background? Do you transition from gym, from weight training? Do you have any kind of experience with that? And his answer was obviously, well, I was lifting weights for a long time, but I got an injury, and now I'm looking for something healthier, something that is gonna
Okay.
I'm looking for something that is gonna heal my body and not destroy, like, weight training. So maybe, if you think about only doing push-ups, pull-ups, but it's still, I don't see any difference in, like, and honestly, I had even discussion with my friend also a couple of days ago in regards to the safety of certain sport disciplines. And I said that if I would have a guy that his only goal is to just continue training for as long as he can, progress at the normal tempo, and he's just searching for some activity that he can sustain for the longest, I would just pick weight training, normal weight training, barbell work. It's there are not as many dynamic elements. The bar path, the path, and the technique is pretty steady at the most part. And if you're doing everything smart, there is a very low possibility of injuries, actually, unless you're pushing very hard in terms of like volume, intensity, to the point of massive overreaching. Then it's a very healthy sport. And in gymnastics, like you said, you have to at some point you have to get comfortable with being very close to ripping your body apart, like you described yesterday. And without
exactly.
this, you're not going to achieve certain level. Just because the immense pressure it takes to your tendons, to areas of your body that are not normally used and designed in a way to use, kind of.
Yeah, that is exactly my point. And believe me, this is so hugely misunderstood. But and I mean, obviously, by general population, it's going to be misunderstood. But even from gym goers, in the words of Max Ada, an Olympic weightlifting coach, I completely love Olympic weightlifting. It's such a similar sport, in my opinion, to rings. In the words of Max Ada, you don't go to training with the idea that you're going to make your body healthier if you're serious about training. You're going to training with the idea that you're going to exchange your health for excellence.
For the results.
In your sport. Yes. And that's exactly what I'm doing. Like, I'm completely aware of the risks of it, and I accept them. I'm not saying I'm better than anybody else because I accept those risks. It's just a personal.
But you're just aware.
Yes. You just have to ask yourself if you're willing to take those risks, if it's worth it to you.
Okay, so in regards to like training philosophy and mental attitude towards training, would what you just described, would that be a difference between, for example, working out and training? Would that be this threshold when you actually sacrifice your health towards results? Then that's the point when you're serious about the results, because you're exchanging your health, your long term. Yes, I'm pretty sure that at some point we all, and more people actually in the calisthenics community, stuff like that, go beyond that level where when it's not about health, but because of the popular beliefs, it's easier to justify. I'm training calisthenics. Okay, you're training with your body weight.
Yes.
So, okay. What you're going to the gym? Like, your grandma is gonna ask, "You're going to the gym? Don't hurt yourself, grandma. I'm working with my body weight only. I'm doing Maltese cross. Nothing serious."
Exactly. That is ridiculous. And completely going back to your original question, if you're not a genetic freak, what you should do is be smart about it. What you can do to be
and
smart
you're not on
is
creatine.
to be exactly. An Italian author, Umberto Eco, used to use this expression, which is resting on a giant shoulder, on a shoulder of a giant, which means that there are people who are incredibly smart in this community, simply use what they put out. There are 100 of years of strength training science. Simply use those principles. It's not that hard, to be honest.
It's definitely not hard.
Yeah, and this is something that I'm so happy that my coach understands perfectly. So simply our training is structured on a block periodization. I guess it's more close to concurrent periodization. I go through a couple of weeks of volume work, then I have strength phases, and then I have my peaking or skill acquisition, followed by
Okay,
hopefully
so that's kind of
the
your
scale
type
acquisition
of
itself.
schedule, your structure.
Yeah.
And in regards like to your coach, do you how long do you work with your coach?
A year. It's been
A
a year.
year. And would you
Yeah.
say that having a coach is a massive, massive value, massive just progression from not having a coach?
It depends. It depends. In the beginning,
Yes, if you're very serious about, of course, about getting into like rings training, uh, then that's very good decision to make, right?
yeah. I mean, if you're a beginner, you don't need a coach. You simply need to work hard,
To
and
work
we
hard
always come back
as
to
we,
this.
yes.
Yeah.
All right,
But
so
if you're serious about making it somewhere in any kind of activity that requires some sort of excellence, you need to put yourself in the best context possible. That means going to the best possible gym, having the best possible coach that you can find. Means those are always like some things that you have to ask yourself whether you're like okay with doing. For example, supplementing, obviously, like literally dedicating your life to the sport, eating properly, sleeping properly. Some of these things, like I'm completely willing, for example, to destroy my body in training, but I know I'm not willing to sacrifice, for example, my diet or my work for training.
you're all, and that's
Always,
something I wanted
yeah,
to ask you, because you started a new job, right?
yeah.
The
Literally a
previous
week
week,
ago. Yeah,
was your first week. By the way,
yes,
like how was it? I know we
yeah.
discussed that yesterday, but for the sake of the podcast, I have to remain as natural. We're recording that for the first time.
Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, it's been hard. I'm not gonna lie.
Hmm.
I'm not gonna romanticize this in any way. It's been really hard. I work a 9 to 5 in a corporate, and I noticed mainly two things, and that is that my performance didn't drop in any way, but simply when I come to training at 7 o'clock p.m. basically, it's not like I'm more prone to being weak. I'm just tired throughout the whole training. I really don't feel like doing it, which is something
Like
very new to me.
mentally, more
Yeah,
mentally.
yeah, mentally,
Okay.
physically, I'm completely okay. It's actually just that I'm tired. I don't feel like training at that moment. You know?
Okay. So it
And
requires extra. So
it
it requires some extra mental power to get
yes,
yourself up and
to
actually
switch
go
on.
to the gym.
Yeah, to switch on in that like training mode because I'm very vocal in a sense. I'm more of like in any sport. I feel like you have two typical personalities. Obviously, you have some derivation and variations from them, but you have the quiet guy um, who's very
Like
drawn into
in
his own thing, sports.
okay,
You know
okay.
what I mean? Like he's just thinking about what is gonna happen, how he's gonna execute it and everything. And then you have people that are more vocal. Still, I'm obviously trying to think about what is gonna happen, but I'm definitely more vocal, more about aggression towards my training and stuff like that. I definitely tend to be on the lighter side, you know. Um, so yeah, so it was definitely a new feeling to me, not being in the mood like I don't feel like training today. I really don't want to train.
Hmm.
But
But
yeah,
these are
you
the
gotta.
moments you have to just
Yeah, exactly.
push that,
Yeah.
and yes, that's the realization I came to, and that kind of like gets us to the more mental, I guess, mental type of discussion in regards to training, uh, because like training is fun. It's
Mhm.
it's a part of the day that I enjoy, but as more things started happening in my life, it leads to every single area that you can think of, really. And in those things, I'm progressing. I'm happy about it, but my mental focus naturally dropped when it comes to training. So it's not longer the same kid that was thinking about his 3 sets of 40-kilo chin-ups 3 days before and was stressing out about it. I'm no longer that, and that kind of so that leaves you with some kind of freedom, of course, but at the same time you don't have as much, you know, that drive, that power that before, because training was one of the most important things for you. You have to kind of force yourself a bit to do it. So you still want to do it. You're still passionate about your training, but at the same time you have to just include this element of pushing yourself beyond that comfort zone. Training is no longer something in my comfort zone, to be said. Like that's how I would describe it. And these are the moments I have different feelings. I have like some like on the one side, I think that if you don't enjoy it as much, maybe it's not the thing that you should do as much. But on the other, I think that you're never gonna do only things you enjoy, right? What is your attitude like right now? Because you transitioned to the job, I'm pretty sure that your situation is gonna just get more stable very soon, and it's gonna be much easier to just switch. But till then, you're gonna have to just keep up with this schedule, right? Kind of.
Yeah, I mean, like, to me, it's honestly not a problem because, like, I come from a background like that. Simply what it's written on the paper for the day, I'm gonna do it. You know.
Okay.
And that's exactly my point. Like some people, and I'm not using it to say those people are weak or anything. It's simply that not having that competitive background, you're not used to simply doing something that makes you uncomfortable in that moment. And I'm very used to that. I don't mind one bit, you know.
Mm-hmm. That's why
I'm not
also
gonna feel like it. I'm gonna do it. Yeah.
So that's why probably the video I've done about reverse ego lifting was positively. So you said that it was my best video because I addressed some points. Yes, because I addressed some points that I think that I experienced myself with bodyweight training, which is very. You're very prone to that if you're training anything that is. To the general population effective and pleasing to the eye. If you're doing something that is just, you know, what's the word? Not like appealing to the masses. If you're doing something that appeals to others, it's fun for you to do. It's very easy to get into that trap of being just doing this comfortable thing, not going beyond that, and actually sacrificing the beauty of what you do, this aspect of like being looking very light, that it's easy, that this element is doing like you can think of different aspects of it, but sometimes you have to go to training and just push your boundaries, whatever it means. You just have to show the effort, and that's something that in bodyweight fitness especially, I see people that are able to do handstand, they get stuck in this mindset of, okay, I'm able to do handstand, now I'm going to start doing handstand each session, I'm going to do, and they never go beyond that. They never actually put anything on the paper, like you said. They just call it skill work and do it like it's some kind of acrobatics or some practice, sort of practice. Like, what's your, do you, because sometimes if I have a client, sometimes I'm going to write on a paper that, for example, do 15 minutes wall handstand practice, but I'm actually going to write down exact drills that this person has to do during this time. So I'm not setting up any very specific like boundaries, but I have just a framework, just time, you know. So do you do something like that, or it's strictly sets and reps in your training?
So it depends on, obviously, on what the goal of your practice is. If it's skill acquisition purely, I believe you
Mm-hmm.
can work more on a schedule where you simply go, okay, I want to do 1 hour of this, because
Okay, okay.
at one point the returns are going to diminish, from trying over and over. You're just going to get burned out. So it makes sense in case of like practices. In my opinion, I'm not an expert on these things, but I'm talking from my perspective on those. But like, imagine
Mm-hmm.
breakdancing or hand balancing, even. You're just gonna try something for an hour, let's say. You're gonna work on it. Obviously,
Yes,
even in
yes.
those sports, you have like something like conditioning and basics, that you have always to master. But still, it comes down really to the trial and error,
Don't
which
you
is
think
not
that people confuse those sports with calisthenics very often?
yes, absolutely, absolutely, yeah, it's huge.
They confuse rather the mental the attitude that is related to these sports like acrobatics or breakdancing. They transfer that they try to just that to calisthenics, where it doesn't work because calisthenics is a strength training. You have the skill and in gymnastics, of course, but we talk and it's most important, unlike breakdancing, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree in everything. There's a huge misunderstanding of like what you should actually do when you're training in calisthenics. Trial and error, that's not your main focus. Your focus is building strength, and I think it comes from like the street aspect of calisthenics,
Mm-hmm.
from its
Yes,
origins, but it's not as precise and everything, but that
more
cannot be used
spontaneous.
exactly. But you cannot use the origin of a sport as an excuse to completely misunderstand the philosophy that would make you actually progress. That is, you're looking not to be successful, and that's like, if you're fine with
Yes,
it, cool. But I'm not.
it has to progress. It
Yeah,
has to progress.
uh,
That's a very good point about this origins of, because origins of calisthenics are like that, and people will want to say that, well, what I like about street workout, because it's mainly used in the context of street workout, let's call
mhm.
it. Calisthenics is more like, right now, it's more, uh, I think, associated with gymnastics than
Yeah,
like the
definitely.
street communities. But the street workout, what I like about street workout is that it's more about the general the style, the being free, freedom. Well, that's okay. That's like, you can obviously, you can say that it's very important, because that can create a certain culture around this sport. But the truth is, if you're not strict about your training, and if you're very loose in your approach, you're not going to get as great results as you could. And
Yeah,
that's simply well. And like, it's coming to this question
yeah.
about
Just to finish this point about my specific training, moments where I'm not like precise are, for example, GPP. In
okay.
when I do volume blocks, so I come from in vol when I come to volume blocks. Imagine that I'm coming from peaking, followed by basically 10 days of detraining. So my work capacity is zero at that point. Like, I cannot handle anything. So obviously I have to do a lot of GPP to come back into like fitness form, let's call it.
Mhm.
And I simply, like, my trainer just writes like, do 20 minutes of something. Like, it can be like, I do a lot of rope jumping, but it can be like rowing, stuff like this, whatever.
Okay,
Just do some work. That's it. Like,
I
GPP literally
understand.
should
Yeah.
mean just like, just do some work.
Yes, obviously there are times that you have to be a bit looser in your approach. You cannot be only
Yeah.
focused on numbers and all that. But in regards to numbers, and I would really want to make this question more about yourself, because I think how big role it plays in your approach in general, from what you from what you told me at least. So a couple of months ago, you told me to watch the movie Moneyball. It's Brad Pitt's movie, and I'm sure that many of you may actually know because it's pretty famous, even though it's not it's not a new movie, right? But yes, and you told me to watch this movie and to kind of like transition certain aspects of it when it comes to philosophy and mental attitude to the training, and that it's exactly what you did, right? And so instead of so what I would like to ask you, because I do have some of my own opinions, and I can tell you right now that I really enjoyed the movie, and that just starting from the actors, it's like, for example, this scene where when they sit like behind the table with this mathematics man. It was just perfect. It was just played perfectly. But I would like to just tell us, what is that thing that you think you applied to your life, to your training philosophy from that movie, that changed your perspective.
So this movie, it's huge for me. It's my, for real, to myself, I don't know to my coach, but definitely to myself, it's the number one influence in my training philosophy. You know, this and some weightlifting videos, but that's besides the point. So some aspects that I find absolutely crucial in this movie. The first one is that the biggest trait that you can have to achieve success is in any aspect of life is being critical. If there's one thing that I'm grateful for that university has given me, it's the ability to be critical in any moment.
That's
If
something you really like talk about a lot, about being critical and the value of that.
Yeah. To me, it's huge because like you should like why should the things be like they are? That's always the point. Like they can be right. I'm not saying like always critique anybody, you know, like everyone is wrong, I'm the smartest one. That's not the point. The point is that never take anything for granted, you know.
To question, right?
Question anything. It's so crucial. Question your own training constantly. Question the way you behave with people. All these things to me are extremely important.
That's very interesting, and that's very uncomfortable if you think about it. You have to be very you have to like really be in a very uncomfortable state all the time, because you never allow yourself to be comfortable with what you know, with what you. So always, if any thought comes to your mind regarding anything, but we talk about training, so let's talk about training. You're not going to take that thing for granted. You're not going to just try to dismiss the fact this happened, or just try to distract yourself from this thought, but you're actually going to take that and analyze what is maybe wrong in my training. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's another. Maybe this is right. Maybe, you're constantly analyzing, you're constantly going and chasing that perfection, which is a very good feature, but very uncomfortable to sustain, right? Okay, so go on, please.
The second one is directly related to one of the climax scenes of the movie, which is the streak, you know.
Okay, yes.
And during the streak, I love that scene. Why? Not because they win so much. That is just a product of what we're actually the being critical. You know,
the product of being critical. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Allowed to be to get to that point. What I love about that scene is that there are literally some snippets, some voiceover snippets from Bob Costa. Bob Costa is an ESPN reporter, which actually said that stuff in that moment, which was in the lines of like, what is happening in Oakland right now? It's there's something behind it, like it's some random effect when it was greatness achieved through meticulous thinking and meticulous preparation. That brings me to the point that, like, who cares what people think, in a sense? You're always going to have someone who's going to be very critical of your training. And most of the times, there are people that can be right, but also you're going to encounter a lot of people that are wrong. Who cares, man? Like, just go on, like, whatever, you know. That doesn't mean you shouldn't listen to them, but if they're wrong, they're wrong.
Yes, because that comes to being critical, right? You have to take into consideration many things. So you have to find a balance between doing your thing, but at the same time being critical and thinking of other possibilities.
Yeah. So that to me, it's so interesting. Exactly that. Like, people are always gonna think that there's some magic way to greatness because they never had a taste of it, you know. And what you find in life in general, whether it's training or anything, everything seems very natural when you do it. You know, like, I never felt like I'm excelling at gymnastics, and all of a sudden, like, and I'm not saying I am right now, but all of a sudden I'm doing things that before were like, I felt like they were actually impossible. I really remember when we were having those discussions, like, really back years ago, a lot of
on a
years
Facebook
ago.
forum, yeah. That's how we got to know each other, right?
Yeah. I remember that I stated that I will never train anything harder than a full planche because I don't believe that it's the right thing for me to do. And right now I'm looking at doing, like, I'm able to do cross pull, full planche on rings. I'm able to do multis, all these things, you know. So yeah, like, it's like, it feels natural when you're doing it, but from the outside, it always seems like someone has this weird formula for it, you know.
Well, you know what? Like, I would take that even farther, and because from my experience, like, I can absolutely relate because I was one of the most like stiff people in the middle school, and I remember like not being able to touch my hands when I was even thinking about like shoulder press. You know, it's totally like a galactical move for a person who is as immobile. And so if I think about it, the fact that I could like overcome these thoughts, and I remember all the excuses that was coming to my mind when I started, like that the straddle press in my case is impossible because the structure of my legs, I'm built in this way, like you cannot find. And other people was helping me with, like, some of the people were like supporting me, of course, but I still remember some comments like that were actually like making my assumptions stronger in regards to not being sure that it's possible, you know. Even though I'm talking about skills, I can do even 10 reps right now. I literally remember my thoughts that, for example, in shoulder press, it's just anatomically impossible for me to do because of, yes, you know, I was actually trying to crush this idea of getting that. And I think that that's the biggest value for me from training in general is this ability to just go despite what not only others say, but what you say to yourself in your mind. This ability to just turn off this voice and just go do your work, do your plan, is something that I can transition later on in all the aspects of my life. And that's the biggest value, I guess. That's the just doing the uncomfortable thing, doing something that you question yourself even, and you do it, and you do that despite that. Then you get the results, and you get that you get the feeling that, oh, I'm capable of that. So if I can say something and I can really, like, I can commit to it, I'm able to do it. So then you have the attitude that you can actually achieve whatever you want to do, which is very helpful in your life, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not afraid to try new things.
So yeah, definitely this thing of, like, internally everything seems natural, you know, as very linear. Even though you find obstacles in your way, it always seems like, okay, I'm getting there, progressively, really slowly. But from the outside, everything feels like, yeah, it's impossible that he just made it. It has to be random. No, it's choices that I made on a daily basis, and that is the point of that whole scene, is that like this little small decisions that they made that seem dumb to everyone in the beginning are those that made them succeed in the end. And coming to the last point, which is a bit more of a cynical one, like the first, especially like the second one, it's really like hopeful. The third one, it's a bit more like cynical and related to being like critical, and that's why a lot of people are attack being critical a lot. That like when I'm being very critical of someone, I get attacked a lot. I'm used to it. I don't mind. What I believe also that movie talks about is that it's not morally wrong to profit from someone else's stupidity. And
Okay.
I really do
Okay.
believe that. I think that the fact that I'm doing good, in my opinion, in gymnastics comes from the fact that I'm doing smart choice. That my coach, 100%, not me, is making smart choices for me.
Mm-hmm.
If other people don't understand what is actually the proper approach, and they're still like doing trial and error to learn a Maltese, that's their fault, not mine. I don't have like a moral imperative to teach them what
Okay.
is actually the right method. You do
I
yourself.
get that.
And if you're not going to have success, that is your problem. I'm not going to help you. Like, if you actually come to me and ask me for suggestions and tips and everything, I'm always going to help you, because I like people that are like proactive.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, like, I really believe that it's not morally wrong to profit from someone else's stupidity. It's just,
Okay, so
just
I get that. I get that.
yeah,
So it's a very competitive mindset if you think about it. You
yeah,
you think about yourself. You think about what you can do, and you don't really care uh, about others in this sense. But like you said, you're proactive, which comes to the first part, like you mentioned, the being critical, right? So
mhm,
you're always try to search for, uh, you always try to question things
yeah. But
yourself.
just to add, like, it's definitely a competitive mindset. But as I said, like, if someone comes and it's actually like proactive in their approach to look for new information, to look for a new perspective, I'm always going to help them, because I value this ability to go out of your comfort zone, because it's uncomfortable to come to a guy at the gym and ask, hey man, like, can you help me with this? You know what I mean?
Okay.
I respect
Yes,
that.
it is. It definitely is.
Yeah. And I respect that. And really, like, with the only guy that I train, it just came down to this, like, that he came to me and he asked me a lot of questions about training. And once he asked me whether I would train him or not, it was simply an easy decision for me, because I understood that he's someone that is actually trying to get better, who understands what it's going to take, and that it's not going to be like just me being the smartest trainer alive or anything. It's just going to come down to him doing a lot of work.
Yes, yes,
And
yes. It's only
yeah,
something that will like direct, give him a direction, right? You're not doing the work
exactly.
for him. Uh, yeah. So when it comes to like the social media aspect of training,
Yeah,
uh, because that's another thing. That's another like thing that we discussed already many times, I think.
yeah,
But not going very in depth on that. And of course it's gonna depend, like always. But would you say that there was a time that I think you was doing uh, some kind of blog on Facebook, or like you were putting out content,
yes, yeah,
informative
yeah,
content at some point?
yeah.
How was the page called? Like
Uh,
bodyweight.
the art of bodyweight training,
The
I
art
remember.
of bodyweight training. Yeah, that was before your transition to gymnastics, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was just the
yes.
months before transitioning into gym. Yeah,
Okay. And so my kind of question then, because then we had some conversation, and I know you may be surprised that
hmm
I'm talking about it, because it was very like
yeah.
We did not address this part before, so it's gonna be much more spontaneous. Well, I asked you back then, like, why did you stop? And you said that the reason, and that was the time I was the most like proactive in the sense of making content, and I was just getting into that, and I'm still doing that. So it kind of worked when it comes to myself. But I asked you, like, why? And you said that because you said that training is such an important part of your life,
Yeah.
that you don't want to
progress.
You don't want to put yourself to any risk of ruining your, or just even like you said, just negatively influence your progress in this aspect of life by doing other thing that maybe, like we discussed before, make you prone to that. You have to do things that appeal to masses. You have to go out of your training to record certain elements. You put lots of like mental focus, mental energy to provide content, to provide value, and you look for completely different perspective, for the perspective of a creator and not a performer that has to do their training. So is that something that you still associate with and that you still want to add something to, or?
Yeah, even more at this point. Like,
even more.
I really don't care about like helping. As cynical as it may seem, I really don't care about helping other people, especially in a passive way. And like social media information transmission is very passive in the sense that like you literally find the information that you want in your feed just by clicking that you're going to follow a person. Who cares? Like, if you're not going to ask me for some specific thing, I'm not going to record it. Like, I don't care at all.
Okay.
I simply care about my training. I do it for myself exclusively. You know, I don't do it for anything else, anyone else. As egotistical as it may seem, that is my training.
And lately, well, my if you think about it, like, my reasons are kind of egoistical as well, but on a bit different surface. I'm gonna talk about it very briefly in a moment. But you started, like, lately you've been posting some of your training sessions. I found that really enjoyable, really fun to watch. The whole scenery of gymnastics hall is such a like incredible place. The atmosphere is great there. You get this calisthenics zone, you get the rings, you get everything. You do different elements, you do jump ropes. It was very fun to watch. Is that something that you're going to continue?
Depends in which phase of training I am. Right now, I'm in a volume phase where honestly I don't have to be as focused, you know, on training as I would be, for example, during peaking. During peaking, I barely publish any videos, you know, because I simply don't want to risk. Like, when it comes to peaking, 1% plays a huge role. You know, 1% can change literally doing a skill from not doing a skill. In peaking, that's relevant. In volume, I'm really not that focused. I always take volume phases more like fitness. You know, I just go to the gym. It's not healthy.
Get a pump.
Exactly, get a pump. Get a pump for the ladies.
Yeah, for the beach.
Exactly.
But that's very interesting, because if you think about it, most people would go the other way. So they would record their the most appealing stuff done in the peaking.
Yeah.
Right. It only shows the dedication you have to your training, to your actual results. Something that, you know, for example, I'm too weak for. I have to record, like, if I'm doing some attempt, I have to record. And so, in your opinion, like, recording your set, let's say you're doing your peaking, your 1 rep max.
Yeah.
Is like recording this set. Would you say that it's gonna just take that 1% of your?
Depends. Depends. I mean, like,
but you want to eliminate. You want to eliminate. Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, there are some people that, and I feel like they're definitely more on the other end of the spectrum. You know, those people that are more like quiet, then can get into the zone. Let's call it, like, really fast. You know, they just like switch in and they're completely focused on the task at hand. To those people, I feel like probably it doesn't hinder their like true 1 rep max that much. But to me, like my 1 rep max attempt starts like for real like 2 minutes before I even actually go in rings. You know, I have a whole sequence of things that I do specifically not to variate in any way, like from my 90% attempts to my complete 100% 1 rep max attempt. It's always the same process. I always get on the rings in the same way, you know, because otherwise I just cannot like get into that like zone. It really starts like 2 minutes before the attempt to me.
Yeah, so that's that. Like I said, I'm gonna repeat myself, but that shows the level of the dedication that you have to just have to your sport, because that's something. Okay, I can relate in to some degree, but for me, the aspect, for example, the aspect of creation and aspect of documenting,
Exactly.
the aspect of having that is even more important. So, for example, for myself, the results are important to everyone, but for myself, it's I look at that more holistically. I don't like this word that much, but I look at that more as a general thing that I do. So I go there, I make something, I do some progress, I record that, I have that on paper, I kind of create my story, myself, you know. That's how I look at that. That's my way. Probably not the best way to make pure results, and probably that's something that I start to change. I try to just switch the mindset, you know, because what I do, what I do on a daily basis, what I get into right now is more and more creative stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And like we talked yesterday, the mindset of creating something is different than the mindset of executing.
Yes.
And I want to relearn. I want to relearn. Like I want to just be able to switch. You know, just when I go to the gym, when I'm actually doing my training session, I would really love to be able to get into that zone of executing. Like you're doing exactly, no matter what you feel, no matter what happened this day, no matter how you feel physically, mentally, you're just able to do it. That would help me so much. If you think
Yeah, I
about
mean,
it,
like it's completely crucial. I remember, I think he's called Brad Gibbs. Is this Kiwi guy he's the like powerlifting world champion, you know, and he wrote a really good post, you know, on Instagram that about like the necessity of not changing anything in your pre-lifting routine when it comes to 1 rep maxes, you know, because like our minds are pretty weak, to be honest, in the sense that we always like once it starts to get heavy, you know, that you know you're going to struggle to close that rep, you're going to try to cheat in any way possible. Even mentally, you're going to think, okay, I'm going to try to keep it. I'm going to try to like get on rings faster. I'm going to try to hype myself up. We have a million of different ways to like make it easier on ourselves. But actually, the best thing you can do is simply execute what you have been doing for months, you know, and that's why I really have like a pre-movement ritual in a sense that I always say one thing for real. Like I always step on the rings with like with the like always my left hand goes always on the rings first. I always like put my rings guard.
Also, it's a very specific ritual.
Yeah, and it's always the same because I want to minimize the risk of doing anything differently when it comes to really hard stuff, you know?
Okay. I completely get that. And like I said, it's a very good thing if you can, if you're able to just like focus so much on a task. And so like coming back to this discussion, when you create something, it's the opposite, because sometimes some like if you don't feel like, for example, if I don't feel like making a certain creative task, I don't do it. And I'm gonna get like and I'm gonna get better results because of that, because then I'm gonna feel better. I'm gonna feel good to actually do something, and I'm gonna have that natural spark, that natural energy that will allow me to produce something much better. And forcing yourself doesn't work when it comes to writing, when it comes to like studying is of course different. When it comes to studying, you also have to just have some kind of like mental strength in a sense, because you also have to do one thing, but it's also dependent on mindset. Yeah, I'm talking about just transitioning very smoothly from these mindsets. It's something that I'm striving for, and I'm gonna try to apply more and more that to my training. This strength, this just executing mindset to my training, and I think that it's something that I learned not only from the movie, but from actually discussing that with you. And so, at the very, do you have something to add, like to?
No. I completely agree with what you said.
Because we're gonna be finishing. However, I want to, because I have three, I think, good questions that were being asked on the Instagram yesterday on my story, and so couple of them, one of them was definitely addressed. So the question is, what is the best front lever variation? And we discussed that at the very beginning.
Yes.
So once again, it's a invert to front lever, dead stop to pull with hold. It's worth mentioning. The second question I have is, it's also kind of related, and unfortunately I was not very specific in what I wrote here, but I think that the main message, the main idea of the question is the periodization something important, or why can't we just go there and do 3 sets of max hold and instead? So that I would because maybe that's not the, because I call, well, what I have written here is periodization versus just do holds. And I think that the question was pretty much similar, and it gets to our smart work versus hard work discussion.
Yeah. I mean, like, that is a ridiculous question to me, to be honest, because, like, why would you do that? Like,
well, I don't want to. If I change the information in this question, it's my fault totally.
No. I mean, like, I'm again, like, anything that was said today, I'm not attacking the person. I'm always critiquing ideas. I don't care who you are.
Okay.
I don't care what's your level of fitness, whatever. I don't care. But why would you do that? Any other sport, you have to take this much more seriously. Any other sport uses some kind of periodization. In strength sports, it's absolutely crucial to use it. In some other sports, it's a bit less important. But every sport that it's took seriously, it has to simply follow some rules about the way you structure your season. You know, so I mean, like, you cannot think about, like, just doing max holds. That would be Bulgarian training, which is a term that comes from Olympic weightlifting, under the guidance of the Bulgarian team in the 80s, under Ivan Abajev, I think. And why was it successful? Because those people literally had nothing else to do. They were top tier international athletes. Think not the 1%. I mean the 0.1% of the world population. You know, they were the best in the world at what they were doing. They had the whole day just to train, and they were drugged as flamingos, basically. You know, so, like,
they were like injecting creatine day and night.
Yeah, exactly. Creatine, like all kinds of creatine at that time.
All kinds, monohydrate, not only monohydrate.
You cannot think you're one of those. Like, you're a normal person, pretty much. Probably you have normal genetics, maybe not exceptional, maybe not like subpar. Probably they're normal. Just train, and be smart about it. Like use the best things you can use, which is um, strength training science, the best context you can have in having a coach, in having the best gym you can have, and working hard. It's not that
So
hard.
sacrifice as much as you actually are willing to, right? So if you're willing to go on a very high level, sacrifice as much as you need. If you're not willing to sacrifice certain things, don't do it. Because from the
don't think it's not hard, but it's not like it cannot be that easy. That would be too easy. Otherwise, we would be all doing 3 sets of max holds for everything. Till we learn
so
everything.
it doesn't have to be complicated, because I think that we could just go with this question if we can get the main idea from that is, I think, do we really have to complicate training so much in order to get results?
Yeah,
that's the question basically. I think,
and it's not always the case.
And there is no one answer. There is like
I mean, if you're a beginner, it can be like pretty just like go to the gym, work, and something it's going to happen anyway. I'm completely on that side of the discussion. If you're more advanced, the more you go on, the more complicated it has to become. Otherwise, you're not going to progress. But it cannot be as easy as doing 3 sets of max holds. Otherwise, in Bulgaria in the 80s and would be
you're right.
Very drugged.
So the last question of today, and I'm not gonna lie, I would ask you, and I'm pretty sure I did at some point. What transitioning from the front lever going higher, what is harder, one arm front lever or Victorian cross?
Depends. Like if we're talking about like Victorian on P bars is it's ridiculous. Like I know about people who had like an 8-second front lever and were able to hold like decently a Victorian on bars. So
yes, like, that's not a Victorian cross.
Exactly.
Like people...
That is just like a fake. Between
and that bothers me that people actually call that Victorian cross. That they're able to Victorian cross, even though it's like tremendously easier than even like it's not even close to what you do on rings.
Between the actual 2 scales, I can tell you from my experience and in general, one arm front lever, even when done really correctly, straight body, no side bending, let's call it, it's still way easier than a Victorian.
Way easier.
With Victorian done absolutely like perfect form,
Okay. It's one of
my percentages just for fun, no training. Okay, I made with a 30-second plus front lever. I'm able to do a solid hold, one arm front lever hold with like 4 kilos of assistance. And that Victorian, like I believe that my absolute best right now would be like 12 kilos of assistance before like complete form breakdown, so it's pretty far away. It also like it tackles different muscles. That's also the reason. Like front lever and one arm front lever are very similar. You're simply like subtracting one arm from the equation, but you're still using the same muscles, just a lot more. What happens in Victorian is different from front lever.
It's different,
There are similarities, like the lattice still plays a big part in it, and if you don't have enough lat strength, you're not going to even be able to get close to it. But the role of like little muscles in Victorian, it's ridiculous. Like I just started training Victorian, by the way. Like this is my first training block where I'm actually like trying to actually achieve it. I don't think it's going to come this training block. More probably in the next one, so in around 8 months. I'm doing in my volume block like Victorian with my feet on the ground, just to condition my rear delt, my triceps and everything. And I've never felt such strong cramps, at my triceps and rear delts than this. Like not even with front lever, which is ridiculous, like non-assistant front lever, it's still way easier than doing Victorian with feet on the ground.
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, but do you have the aspirations of trying one arm, of getting one arm front lever at some point? You're very close to that.
Honestly, I think I'm gonna get
right
it.
now.
I mean, I honestly, yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
like,
so, why
it's
not?
just a matter of time, to be honest.
Yes,
To me,
probably.
it's just like with one arm front lever. To be honest, I I don't think I'm that far away. 4 kilos, it's not a lot. And like I'm gonna like imagine the transfer that I'm gonna have in my overall pulling strength from Victorian. And I'm gonna start training
exactly.
more frequently. So honestly, to me, like one arm front lever is just a matter of time. I believe that I'm gonna get it like pretty soon. To be honest, you get even when I was just trying it for fun, like on my off weeks from training, like between some different phases between like volume and peaking, and like just without any specific training, I got to 4 kilos, and if you're not training specifically for sunk wing and you get so close to it, I think it's pretty close.
Yeah, I get that. All right, so I guess we came to the end. So I would really like to for the and then many more things to discuss. So I'm absolutely up for it in the future. So at the very end, where we can find you. On your Instagram, definitely. Okay. I'm gonna link down your Instagram. No, where we can find you. Not in a bad way.
God damn it! I see people stalking me right now. I don't have a social media presence, to be honest, that much online. I'm simply on Instagram. I'm simply on it. I would say just Instagram. D_Molinaro. That it's like my handle.
Okay. I'm gonna definitely link that to the description. Maybe at some point, just your attempt.
Pardon?
Yeah, actually, the last post was very. It's really good. Like the caption and everything was really nice to read. So I think that you have the value to provide. Long run, and is that that would be it. If you have any suggestions for next guests, then definitely leave a comment if you came so far, because honestly 2-hour long discussion is quite a long one, but it was very interesting. I'm probably gonna put it maybe on Spotify if it's possible, maybe on Anchor, maybe on other platforms. We will see. So thank you, and see you next time.